On Secret Scotland tonight, we tell the story of safecracker turned commando Johnny Remensky, using for the very first time his own unpublished autobiography.
And we visit the Highland estate of Mohammed El Fayed to reveal the astonishing story of one of the previous lairds, Sir Charles Lockhart Ross, the last Briton to be declared outlaw.
Here lies the body of John Ramsay, better known in Scottish folklore as Johnny Remensky, safecracker and prison escapee extraordinaire, whose exploits became the stuff of tabloid legend. But Johnny's wasn't just a life of crime. During the Second World War, he served in a crack unit of commandos behind enemy lines in occupied Italy. So just who was Johnny Remensky?
He was a good man, a good uncle. He was a good uncle. He was kind.
He was always courteous to people and treated people as, I suppose he would like treated himself. He was just a gentleman, a gentle Johnny. I mean, that was his name.
Well, I find him to be a very devious, despicable person, very sly, not a very trustworthy person to have around you at any time, you know.
There was no criminal quite like him, you know. He was a decent man, really, you know, who just discovered that the only way to live was to open safes. The only thing he ever did. He never did any other crime in his life.
Tonight in Secret Scotland, using for the very first time Johnny Remensky's own unpublished autobiography, we tell the true story of his life and reveal the truth behind his recruitment to the commandos.
Chapter 1. My parents were both Lithuanians, and I was number 4 in a family of 5. My father was a coal miner, and my earliest recollections are of him hobbling around on crutches after an accident in the mine. He was a tall, good-looking man, fond of a little drink.
Johnny was just 7 when his father died, and his mother took the family from the mining village of Glenboig in Lanarkshire to live in the Gorbals of Glasgow.
Well, I didn't know his father, but my gran, she was a nice woman. She was like John. Even in nature and that, she was like John.
For the sum of 6pence a week, Govan Street School gave us 3 good meals a day and was supposed to keep us out of mischief. What a hope. The little city urchins who were my companions were steeped in roguery and soon initiated me into trickery.
Johnny soon became a petty thief along with the rest of his gang, and a spell in Borstal followed. It was the start of a criminal career which would see him spend the majority of his years behind bars, as the Gorbals street urchin graduated into more serious crimes.
I think John just had to, if he seen a safe anywhere and knew there was a safe, he had to try it, just to see if he could. The thrill of it, as you said, the thrill of opening a safe. But no, didn't matter whether he had money or not, he still had to go ahead and try that safe.
I think it was the only thing he knew. He always was going to give it up, and then he ran out of money, so he'd do another wee job. And he was good at his job, you see. That's the thing, he could do it.
Johnny's talent for safe cracking was to make him a legend.
Taking an ounce of gelignite in my hands, I kneaded it until it was soft like butter, pressed as much into the keyhole as it could take, and then worked it deeper into the lock until a space appeared. This I refilled with gelignite after pushing this 2 down with the knitting needle, and repeated the process until the whole ounce was in the hole. I covered the hole and detonator with a portion of soft modelling clay so that the charge would be airtight. That was John, ready for business. I pulled the coils apart, prepared to use solely the 3-feet wires at the end of the detonator. The situation was dangerous, because all that separated me from the safe was a space 3 feet wide. I touched the wires of the detonator with a pocket battery, and immediately there was a dull thud.
I can't think of any other safe blower that was so professional. And, you know, many tried it, but very few made it. He made it every time.
He's a very unlucky criminal. He seemed to be caught on every venture. He didn't seem to have any luck at all. This is why he was a loner. I've never heard of anyone working with him.
Johnny's criminal career continued, but his taste for safecracking was making him ever more notorious. And after being caught blowing a safe in Aberdeen, he was sentenced to 5 years. Locked in a prison cell as Europe plunged into war, he looked on in frustration.
A year of my sentence passed, and then Hitler made his bid of conquest. I wanted to get out and have a go at Hitler for my king and country. Yes, my country. For although I am a Lithuanian by parentage, my roots are in Scotland, the land of my birth. I've a warm spot for Lithuania, always will have, but nothing can compare with my love for Scotland, and if my life was forfeit in its defence, then gladly would I pay the price.
While inside prison, Johnny did everything he could to smooth his path into the army, writing to the Secretary of State, and even going as far as petitioning to have his name changed.
Dear Sir, I would like to have the name of John Ramensky altered to John Ramsay. My reason for wishing a change is that it would enable me to make a fresh start in a few weeks' time. I intend to join the army.
For a man with a record like Johnny's, his request was looked on surprisingly favourably, with the governor of Peterhead intervening personally on his behalf. This has fuelled the romantic notion that the army had him specially sprung from prison so that his safecracking expertise could be used in an elite squad of commandos.
I believe that Lord Lovett, yeah, can't quote me on this, but Lord Lovett took him out of prison because we wanted a special safecracker in our mob. And they took him down to Littlehampton. And I heard he was doing a couple of safes while he was down there, so they got him out before the Red Caps got him. So they took him over to Italy. That's all I heard about him. That was afterwards. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea, but it sounds like him.
He was the only known criminal who was taken into the commandos. One or two sneaked in, but he was the only one who was known before they took him in.
One of the myths surrounding Ramensky was that he'd been sprung from prison in order to join the commandos. It's even been suggested that that was a storyline for the film The Dirty Dozen. But in the Scottish Records Office, we found documents which confirmed that the military did play it by the book and waited till Ramensky was a free man. In an internal Scottish Office memorandum written in 1959, a civil servant wrote,
Ramsay was not released specially from prison to join the army. He was discharged in normal course on the 8th of October 1942 after having served 4 years.
So on Wednesday morning I departed for Achnacarry with the glad tears and best wishes of my dear mother as a benediction. She was so happy at the thought of her scapegoat son going away to do something decent for a change.
I first met Johnny when I went up to Achnacarry to do the commander training, the basic commander training, and discovered that I was in a Nissen hut, literally 2 beds away from him. All the time he was Jock Ramsay, as far as that's concerned. But even in the training, he stood out like a sore thumb. He had a Glasgow accent you could cut with a saw. And one scene never forgotten. He had his great, great broad Lithuanian features, you see. Huge hands, enormous, very short, stubby fingers. And the thing that shook me was that this man had apparently come from Civvy Street straight into the commandos. I found this very, very hard to understand.
After some unarmed combat, we went on an assault landing. 6 or 8 of us to a boat. We piled into canvas-covered collapsible boats and shoved off into the loch. As we came within several hundred yards of the landing beach, Bren guns opened fire on us, not to hit us, just to make it realistic. Brother, did they? The longer we stayed in the water, the longer we were in danger, so we sculled like mad. As we grounded on the beach, hand grenades were thrown into the water. This added to the din. We hurried as quickly as we could from the sea, dodging potholes filled with water. While taking a strong point in receiving covering fire from Bren's, we came to the final assault point. We rushed at it, firing our rifles rapidly. Suddenly, down crashed Taffy Williams. We finished the attack with bayonets, then went to Taffy. Someone had shot him through the genitals. Live ammunition and grenades are always used.
At Achnacarry, about 1 in 10 of the people who had been interviewed as volunteers were allowed to do the training. The rest were rejected, out of hand. So when we started with probably 1,200, there were only 120 of us left. That's the way it was. And he was in that bunch of people. You could imagine what a strain it would have been for anybody trying to take part in that, let alone somebody who came from civilian life.
The greatest ambition of my life was to be the proud owner of the famous green beret. Pride alone insisted that I must never let my sponsors down. On the 8th of March 1943, I fulfilled that greatest ambition. The blistered feet, the fatigue and honest endeavour had not been in vain.
In 1943, the opportunity Johnny had been waiting for finally came, and the faith the military had placed in him was to be tested to the full. He was sent to join a crack team of commandos based behind the front in the campaign in Italy. The squad had top secret orders.
To go infiltrate the lines or drop beyond the lines, either to capture certain documents or certain people and bring them back. Each one was a specialist. I myself was a radio operator with codes. John, as we know, was a safecracker.
As the Nazis fled Rome, Johnny's squad was close behind them. His job was to blow the safes in the German embassy there in search of evidence that it had been used as a spy centre and arms depot.
Going from room to room, we found about 11 safes and 3 strong rooms. I was told they were my baby, so I quickly got to work.
One particular safe, we couldn't blow it. It's like that. Every time we put 8 out, it just bounced all over the place. So the liaison officer of the Swiss embassy came along with a key, and it was full of uncut diamonds. Yeah, you should have seen Johnny's face.
These top-secret army communiques show how successful the mission was. The commandos found not only arms and explosives in the embassy, but other documents useful to Allied intelligence.
Some souvenirs were also collected. Included in mine were some banners. These were blood red with a white circle in which was a black swastika. Gold tassels hung at the bottoms.
I left him at the end of the war, I would just say in 44, 45 in Italy. He was in the transit camp. The reason why he was in transit camp, the war was over in Italy. The Americans had moved up, and the D-Day had gone over. The war was nearly over in Europe. And I saw him playing Crown and Anchor, his favourite game with Americans, and he's taking money off him right, left, and so we left him there. God knows what happened after that.
Johnny left the army with a record of distinguished service, but on his return to civilian life, the pull of his old ways proved too difficult to resist.
But he couldn't get any job. He tried to be a bookmaker, but he lost more money than and well, I'll do one more job. And he did the Donald post office job, and of course he was caught.
At his trial, Lord Russell jailed him for 5 years, admitting the sentence would have been harsher but for his war record. Lord Russell wasn't his only admirer.
The police were, may sound strange, but they had some admiration for him too, because he wasn't a thug. He hated violence, as I said earlier, and the police admired him to some extent, albeit he was a criminal. They had a soft spot for him, as I had, as most people had.
What was the public reaction to him?
Well, I think that I liked him, you know, because he never hurt anybody's life. He never assaulted anybody, attacked anybody. He was arrested. He never attacked the policeman. He just accepted that was it, he's got. So that was something in his favour. He just robbed banks, safes, that's all he did.
After the war, Johnny's return to crime made him a tabloid legend, but his fame was of no benefit to him. He spent the majority of his remaining years behind bars. Johnny had become a legend as a safecracker, but in prison he became notorious for another talent, escapology.
When he got to Peterhead, apart from possibly a few friends that he had in there, he needed something to bring attention to himself. Escaping was one thing.
He frequently escaped from Peterhead prison, which is a difficult thing to do. I think he escaped on 9 occasions. I think he holds the record for this. He was always caught, of course, within about 2 miles of the prison, but he continued to escape. It was possibly the thrill of it, of doing it.
Well, he escaped on a number of occasions while I was with him at Peterhead, and one particular occasion, it was said, although I don't think anybody's ever proved it, but it was said that Johnny actually scaled the wall or climbed the wall with his fingertips. The man had massive hands, strong, strong fingers.
If you think about Johnny years ago, he was the last man to ever be shackled. You know, and there was a lot of conditions in the prison that he didn't agree to, so he kept running away.
He wouldn't have been treated any different other than the fact that he was classed as a strict escapee. He was kept in what we termed a strong cell on the ground floor. This was a cell with no furniture at all. Even his bed was concrete, which raised about 6 inches off the ground. The only clothing that they kept was their underpants.
At the age of 62, on one of the few post-war occasions he was a free man, Johnny blew a safe in Rutherglen. It was to be his last big job.
He blew the safe, there was nothing in the safe. He forced a drawer next to the safe, there was nothing in that. He then made good his escape, or he left the bank at any rate, not realising that the next drawer, which was locked, had about £100,000 in it. He didn't realise that. He found out at the trial, or the hearing, that there had been £100,000 in this particular drawer, but again his luck had failed him. He fled from the bank and was arrested by a young trainee constable in the back court.
Johnny Rumensky ended his life as he lived it, in captivity. In November 1972, at the age of 67, he suffered a brain hemorrhage and collapsed here in Perth Prison. He died 24 hours later in Perth Royal Infirmary.
He was an uncle. Well, I didn't have many uncles, you know, so it was like one of the families, like my dad been there, my mother been there, my sisters. He was just a part of the family. And he'd always, as I said, if he went away any time, if he went away, say for a weekend or that, he always come back to my mother.
We're such a good character, we've gone so well with each other. To think that he was in prison and he died in prison. I found all my friends on the telephone and got in touch with them, and they was ringing backwards and forward all over the place. We just couldn't believe it. We just couldn't believe it.
He was just a born thief, and he would possibly die one. The amount of times he'd been in prison over the years, that was just Rumensky's style.
He's actually spent his last Christmas with myself and my boys, and that was in 1972. That was his last Christmas. He came down to me with my mother and the boys, myself.
What was that like?
It was nice because it was a family time at Christmas and that, and my sisters and that came to the house, so they all just gathered. It was just all our one family.
I realised what the world offered. Peace and happiness on the one hand, and pain and torment on the other. Which path I would follow, no one but myself could dictate. What the future holds, I do not know. But I do know that if it is possible to go straight, then I will go straight. If my best effort is not good enough, then I must do better than best.
Balnagowan Castle in Easter Ross. This is one of the oldest continuously inhabited castles in Scotland, for centuries the seat of Clan Ross. Its current owner, Muhammad Al-Fayed, bought the castle in ruinous condition and has painstakingly restored it. But in 1872, exactly 100 years before Mr. Al-Fayed bought the castle, the last of the Ross lairds was born. His story is an extraordinary one. Sir Charles was the last Ross laird of Balnagowan, a man with a genius for technological innovation, but with a streak of eccentricity that infuriated everyone who knew him. And no one in the area knows more about the Clan Ross than Rosemary Mackenzie, founder of the nearby Tain Museum.
Well, he was such a character and did such awful things that he a lot of folklore about him. And stories. His father was really dotty, as they say. He used to, if they had a dinner party, he would go into a corner and stand on his head. And then he would take his meals up a tree, and the footman had to bring it along in a tray, and he sat up this tree. So he really was odd. But Sir Charles was only 11, I think, when he died, when his father died. And Sir Charles became heir to Balnagowan.
The young laird was sent to Eton College, where he excelled at sport, the classics, and most especially engineering. He then went on to study at Cambridge. This is Sir Charles Lockhart Ross in all his glory. This particular portrait was painted on his 21st birthday, by which time he'd been Laird of Balnagowan for 10 years. But when he returned to Scotland from Cambridge University to take up the reins of the estate, he found that not everything was to his liking. For Sir Charles soon found that Balnagowan was in a desperate financial state due to his father's neglect. But rather than cursing his dad, Sir Charles took his frustration out on his mother.
She was reluctant to give up the reins, and they fought a lot, and he couldn't get her to move, and she ran the estate. And he did everything to try and get her out. And one night she was going along the corridor, and he came behind her with a lighted candle and set fire to her long red hair. And then he sued her for the mismanagement of the estate.
As the animal heads in this trophy room show, Sir Charles Lockhart Ross was a fanatical sportsman and big game hunter. So much so that he designed and manufactured his own hunting rifle. And this is it, the Ross rifle. Sir Charles was desperate for money, but his efforts to sell his rifle to the British military failed, and he had to look further afield for an upturn in his fortunes.
Eventually he founded the Ross Rifle Company in Quebec, and the Canadian Army was armed with the Ross rifle, and he made a lot of money. And of course the British government wanted a slice of it, and rendered a bill for 360,000 as their share, as it were, and he refused to pay. He wasn't having it.
The standoff led to the most bizarre episode of Sir Charles's extraordinary life. When the Inland Revenue threatened to sequestrate his estate in return for the tax he owed, Sir Charles found a quirk in American law and had Balnagowan made a ward of the Delaware court, effectively making it American territory. Any attempt by the British authorities to seize the estate would be an act of war on the United States. But Sir Charles was to pay a heavy price for his ingenuity. The British government declared him outlaw, the last time this process was invoked. If he returned to Scotland, he faced immediate arrest.
He used to arrive at night by plane. This was when he was still an outlaw, really. And but the village people seemed to get wind of it, and lights were put up in the field to guide him in. And then he hopped off again.
Sir Charles died in Florida in 1942, cantankerous to the very end. When his doctor paid him a final visit, the last outlaw told him, "Get the hell out of here." And on his death, the Ross line died with him.
We pay a visit to the Sunhill Boys in Blue. That's in a couple of minutes here on Scottish.